Chelsea. Let's talk about him. Well, it has certainly been a very, very busy week or so for Chelsea and Chelsea fans. Everything was kickstarted with their exit in the Champions League in some fashion. Obviously, there was a lot of talks about the game, not so much about the football, but more so the officiating and what went on during the game. That was then followed by a midweek loss to Liverpool, and what a dramatic 4-3 defeat that was for them. Liverpool getting 3 out of those 4 goals off corners. Some insane stat that was. Comments from Emma Hayes flying left and right saying that this is maybe not the season for them to win the title. It was not meant to be. X, Y, and Z players looked devastated on the pitch after that loss. Odds started to favor Manchester City, with them also sitting pretty comfortably when it came to goal difference. Then 2 major players announced to leave at the end of the season, with Maren Mjelde and the big super Fran Kirby. When the weekend arrived, of course, the narrative was not going to stay the same, because this WSL has been all about drama, twists, and just comebacks left and right. City lose in the final moments to Arsenal in what was just a classic clutch Stina Blackstenius brace in the final 10 minutes of the game. So not only does that make things a little bit tougher for City to go and grab the title, but Chelsea then go on to beat Bristol City 8-0 and beat City on the goal difference. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the big departures that just got announced with Maren Mjelde and Fran Kirby. Fran Kirby doesn't just have a chant that says Super Fran Kirby for no reason. There's a reason that Super is there. She leaves as Chelsea's leading goal scorer with 105 goals for the club. And I think maybe for those who kind of started watching the WSL post-Euros didn't necessarily get the full Fran Kirby experience. When she was signed from Reading almost 9 years ago, everybody was fighting to get Fran Kirby. I remember there was talks of Arsenal, there was talks of City. I mean, everybody wanted to get their hands on Kirby. And there was a reason that everybody was after this 22-year-old from Reading who just put 71 goals and 46 appearances for the club. She just got her call up for the 2015 World Cup, where England finished 3rd. Kirby's always been that kind of shy, not so outlandish. She's not the one doing crazy celebrations on the pitch. She's not doing crazy talks in the media. She's always very calm-headed, very shy, kind of goes on the pitch, destroys everybody, gets off it, gives everybody a bit of a smile, and everybody just loved Fran Kirby. Which in some ways also reflected her style of football, which was a deadly pass, kind of a very silent killer. Nobody was able to track her right. Nobody was able to see the passes that she saw. Nobody could follow her footwork. Nobody could stop her when she was in the box. Nobody could also calm her down when she was outside of the box. She kind of went on there and in the nicest way possible bullied opponents. Not only in just... She was a clinical finisher when it came in front of goal, but also she was a clinical finisher in front of goal, but her impact on the game, she was a clinical finisher on the ball. Nobody disputes that, and I think that's certainly one of her most praised assets, is just how clinical and devastating she's in front of goal. But her ability to be able to thread passes and see pockets that nobody else could see is just insane. And this Fran Kirby that I'm referencing to is not the Fran Kirby of like 5 or 10 years ago. No, this is the Fran Kirby that we saw at the Euros. If you remember at the Euros, Serena Wiegman stuck with the exact same starting 11 across the entire tournament. And in the middle of it all was Fran Kirby in that number 10 role that was just simply game-changing whenever she was on or off the ball. Her impact has not just been for the England national team, but it's also been very, very important to Chelsea. And when we speak about Chelsea's dominance in this kind of era of Emma Hayes, the Fran Kirby, like those stable players, Kirby's been in the midst of all of it, how the club has grown and how the club has become what it is today. Kirby has been an absolute vital player to that growth and to that recognition of dominance and to that build of dominance and to also that mentality of winning. It's a shame that we didn't get to see her and Sam Kerr combine this season, just because Sam Kerr has been out with an ACL injury and whatnot, and that Kirby connection will always be there. When Chelsea won that 2020-2021 treble, both of them combined for 59 goals for Chelsea. That's just an insane number of goals between those two players. Kirby's time at Chelsea has not been all this flowery rainbow, happy days and happy wins and trebles and whatnot, because the year before this treble that I just mentioned, she missed the majority of the season with what was kind of an inflammatory sac beside the heart, which was a very big concern. Doctors even told her that she might not even be able to play ever again. She's been very, very open about her mental health. She lost her mom when she was very young at 17 and mentioned how she fell into very deep depression, didn't want to play the sport anymore. She's been a very, very big advocate of struggles that players and normal people can have off the pitch as well. You've got to have a lot of respect for a player who kept coming back from these minor injuries, very irritating injuries, reoccurring injuries, huge difficulties off the pitch. Her name will forever be synonymous with Chelsea. Also leaving at the end of the season is the long-serving defender of Maren Mjelde. What a veteran, and what just I think when you look at Maren Mjelde and her play, she's just an excellent athlete who's always been dedicated, who has always been there when needed. She'll forever be remembered for those penalty-taken shots in the dying minutes, but Mjelde for me is just the perfect example of what honestly just an excellent athlete is. I don't know what other words I can find. She's just excellent. She joined back in 2017, which again is that dominant era of Chelsea, and she's been absolutely crucial for that. In the last few seasons, she struggled with injuries and staying fit, but also when she's been fit and not dealing with injuries, she has not been able to make an appearance. She did make an appearance this weekend against Bristol City, rightfully so, last home game, in a blue shirt, but before that, she hasn't played a game for Chelsea since December, even though she's been fit, and I mean, as far as we know, hasn't been dealing with injuries. Throughout those 7 years, just so instrumental, so clutch, big game player, big mentality, and now when she's not been able to make the squad, I think it does make sense at 34 years old to find another challenge and kind of move on. And the big question is what does this mean for Chelsea? Chelsea have had a bit of a turnover in terms of squad in the last few years with, last year they had their captain, Magdalena Eriksson leave, as well as Pernilla Harder, who was... Do I need to speak about Pernilla Harder? I mean, we know her quality. Now you have two more seasoned players who have worn that captain armband for Chelsea, and Mjelde and Kirby leave, as well as Emma Hayes leaving. And I think maybe using the word rebuild is a bit of a harsh one, because Chelsea, in some ways, if you look at their recruitment and you look at the transfers that they've done in the last 2 seasons, maybe, they have been preparing for this point. They have been preparing for those big, veterans to leave. They've, in some ways, perhaps have been preparing for Emma Hayes to leave. The youngster of Aggie Beaver-Jones, who has worked really, really hard to get to the point that she's in right now. Katrina Macario, I mean, we're kind of seeing her on the comeback of an ACL, but even on the comeback, she has been superb. Maika Hamano, the young Japanese player, so much potential, and she's been out on loan in Sweden, came back, and you can see that development already. That new era of Niamh Charles being the captain, we're seeing those captain leadership qualities come out at times. And in some ways, it's been those players that have started over the likes of Fran Kirby and Mjelde in some ways. And so Chelsea can certainly look at their squad and say, yeah, we're kind of prepared to take on this challenge. Now, is this going to be like a very seamless next season with a new head coach and a bit of a changed up squad? No, it's still going to be really tough. I think the most important thing when you've got these youngsters now take that big step and be the ones to take on the responsibility and see those veterans leave is those chemistry links. Chelsea have been known for their winning mentality. Are those youngsters going to have that winning mentality? Have they learned enough from those veterans to be able to implement it on those big, big moments? Those are going to be the big questions. And the reason there's going to be those big questions is because this is Chelsea. This is a club known to win. Now, is it going to be expected for Chelsea to go on and have a quadruple or a treble next season? No, I think people would be crazy to think that a squad with changed up players and new head coach would go out and find immediate success. I think it'd be ludicrous to think so. If they go on and do it, incredible. That would go down in the history books, but it's unreasonable expectations. Also, a player that I haven't even mentioned is Nusken. When Ji So-Yun left, it was like who's going to replace this incredible midfielder? And I don't know if Yuskin came in as a midfielder or a defender or a forward. I'm still struggling to figure out what her position it just is at Chelsea, because she's just good at everywhere. But Nuskin has been such an impactful player. It has been such a joy to watch her. But then again, she's a very young player. Perhaps she made it a big challenge for Fleming to make it into the squad. And so you have those new youngsters coming in. She only came in the summer transfer window, for those who don't know. It'll still be challenging. They'll still need to work on a lot of chemistry, on a lot of links, get those players to actually combine together. It's one thing to have individual brilliance and individual potential, and it's another to be able to convert that into collective brilliance, which is ultimately going to be Chelsea's task next season. And speaking of mentality and brilliance, I was a little bit surprised to see Emma Hayes' comments after that Liverpool defeat. Chelsea's players looked fatigued, they looked tired, and to concede 3 goals from corners is just simply unacceptable. For a team who wants to win the title, conceding 3 goals off corners, just... And this was not the first time that we saw Chelsea kind of be overwhelmed when the opposition looked like they were bringing it to them. I think really that has been the code to break down Chelsea, is bring the game to them, which you can get punished and have 10 goals scored at you, or somehow rewarded by a great tactical setup, brilliant players, and win the game. But the post-game defeated mentality that we saw from Emma Hayes was a bit odd, and I don't think we've seen her just accept defeat that easily before. And perhaps she's had those talks in the locker room with her team, saying, you guys have just lost the title, step it the hell up, which I do think that's exactly what happened before the Bristol game. But to get in front of the broadcaster, Sky Sports, whoever was carrying the game, and saying, well, it's just not meant to be, it's not the year, and you're like, you're mathematically still in this, you can still win it, and it was actually kind of set up in the most perfect way for a comeback, with City having Arsenal as the next game on the weekend, and you playing Bristol City, which is the relegated team going to the championship. So that was a perfect team for you to score a ton of goals. So it wasn't like they had Arsenal lined up and Manchester City was the ones who had Bristol. It was mathematically, they were still in this. It was a perfect weekend to flip the narrative. And to see Hayes come out and say, yeah, it's not happening, was just... I was like, there's no way I'm hearing this right. The players on the pitch looked defeated, and perhaps they felt a little bit of a loss of we actually might not come out with a single trophy this season. This is terrible for us, but it's also terrible for the club, and it's also Emma Hayes' final season, and we are letting her go with possibly no title. So I think for the players, they felt a little bit of sorrow. They felt that bitterness that their season could have just slipped out of their hands, which was exactly what they needed to cue up that reaction against Bristol City and just have a goal fest of 8-0. Emma Hayes may have said the title is over, but Guro Reiten said absolutely the hell not, and came out with 4 goals, which is just the perfect narrative for any neutral watching this WSL title race. It has been super, super fun, and I'm glad she came out afterwards and said, actually, I was just joking. The title is not gone, and we are still here. That being her last game at home, for both Fran Kirby and Mary Aldo, what her result, this is probably everything she could have hoped for. You could see her reaction after the 8 goals, she couldn't believe it, because they just beat City's goal difference. But again, this is just what soccer and football writes for you, poetic stories like that. But throughout those few weeks, as we've seen this narrative of should they have announced Emma Hayes is leaving. And it's a bit of a rhetorical question, because a follow-up question was, how much control did they have over this? Chelsea releases before their Aston Villa game, just drops a bomb on everybody. Nobody had it coming. Nobody saw it coming, especially not before a game. But I wonder just how much control Chelsea as a club had in terms of releasing the news when it was revealed that Emma Hayes was headed to the US Women's national team quite literally a few hours later as an exclusive, and then by the Federation 2 days later. I don't want to say downfall of players, but we've seen this rocky path of a coach's last season across the sport, both in men's and women's. The most blatant example right now is Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool. It's been quite troublesome for him. He also announced his departure from the club at the end of the season, right around the time where Emma Hayes announced hers. There's an endless number of examples where head coaches have said that at the start and then go on to have a troubling season, for whatever reason that might be. So yes, we can ask the question of should have Chelsea announced this, which in my opinion, no, they probably should have kept this inside and maybe not put that emotional strain on players. But then again, I don't know how much control they had, because the Federation and the US national team, with the timeline that they were working with, she was going to be spotted at their training sessions. The US national team, this was not a secret that they could keep either, let's be honest. She's going to leave Chelsea with that one trophy that she can claim with them. She did claim it with Arsenal, but not with Chelsea, and that is the Champions League. I'm not going to break that game down, but I think for starters, those 2 legs between Barcelona and Chelsea were top high level football. It was honestly a chess match after chess match, and watching from a neutral perspective, you just had to appreciate the level of football those two teams were putting on. Like, it was just remarkably high level of football between two teams who were winners, who are coming off doubles and trebles for the last few seasons. Chelsea have put up a really great record in how they've progressed against Barcelona. They've gone from a 4-0 battering in the Champions League final to then beating Barcelona at home and keeping them scoreless. So we've seen this progression, and that second leg was set up for such a great narrative, and it was such great football that we saw, but unfortunately a lot of the narrative afterwards was about the officiating. My 2 cents on the officiating: 1, let's talk about the Buchanan red card. So Buchanan does get the ball first. In my eyes, it looks like she does make contact with the ball first, but I think what nods that second yellow card is that she actually does end up stomping Barcelona's player's foot, who for some reason I'm blanking on who it exactly was. But she does make contact, which, and if you look at that and if you review it, it is a yellow card. Now, knowing that Buchanan was already on a yellow card, perhaps you would have given it another thought. It looked like the referee didn't actually know that Buchanan was already yellow carded. Barcelona players reminded her that, hey, this is her second yellow card, and I wonder if she had already knew in the back of her mind that this is Buchanan's second yellow card, or she was already on a yellow card. What if she taken another decision? You can make an argument for both, but ultimately Buchanan, already on a yellow card, should not be making a tackle like that. Shouldn't be making a risky put your foot in there. It's just, a seasoned player like that should know a little bit better, knowing that this is a huge game with so much on the line. And then you have the penalty that was also in discussion. Unfortunately, when you have a player kind of being sandwiched between two other players, if her leg somehow gets stuck when she's running and she's sandwiched, she's going to go down. Those are the rules of the game. Yes, maybe it was a little bit soft from Lawrence's end because, she didn't necessarily trip her. It was more like Bonmati's foot stomped her from the back. But on the replay, when you watch it, Lawrence does kind of have her arm on Bonmati. So, and in some ways, we could have not even had this conversation at all, and we could have not even talked about the officiating had Chelsea finished their shots and chances in that first half. The famous saying of, like, when you come at the king, you better not miss. And you better not miss those open goal shots. Absolutely nobody gets the luxury of taking open goal shots against Barcelona, and when you miss those, you have nobody else to blame but yourself, which comes off really harsh. But the second half could have looked completely different had Chelsea finished those shots and chances that they had in front of goal in that first half. You need to be super clinical with whatever shots you get against them, which for me, what was actually more frustrating than both of these incidents was just how inconsistent that officiating was across the entire game. So you had Lawrence, in my opinion, maybe not necessarily get carded or get called a foul on that penalty, but she had a very clumsy stomp on Carolina Graham Hansen that for me would have been a yellow card. Multiple fouls from Barcelona players not being called, multiple fouls by Chelsea players that maybe were kind of too soft and were playing within the rules be called. I watched that game multiple times afterwards, and you could see her positioning was just inconvenient for the players, where players were actively avoiding her or actively trying not to clash with her. So for me, it was poor officiating and just poor management of the game from the referee across the 90 minutes. I looked through her records to see like what games she's managed, and the biggest game that she's managed was a quarterfinal between PSG and Roma last season. So she's not been in a position to handle a semifinal game, a second leg semifinal game between Chelsea and Barcelona. For me, that was a wrong appointment. You put in a referee who is experienced, who's been in tough positions like this, who's been able to referee big games like this in big moments. And I fear this was a bit of a fault from UEFA's end again. So perhaps this was Chelsea's golden opportunity to win the Champions League. But like I mentioned, you cannot miss wide open shots against Barcelona. That's how the game goes. Barcelona book their ticket into the final against Lyon. We're going to get a repeat of not last year's, but the year before its final. Barcelona's chance to get revenge. They want to defend their title. Lyon want to reclaim it. It's going to be fantastic. I will most definitely be previewing that final. We're going to be talking plenty about Emma Hayes, her leaving, Sonia Bombastor, said to be replacing her. What's that going to look like? Plenty of talks that I'm very, very excited to have here on the channel. Let me know your thoughts on Chelsea's last 2 weeks, week and a half. It's been a lot of news, a lot of talks, a lot of events happening. Like, I can't imagine being a Chelsea fan in this time. It must be a lot of emotions running high. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your opinions. Want to hear them down below. As always, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. And I will see you later.